So last week, a lot of people, a lot of patrons actually were talking about this. They were, I think they tuned in and watched the Tucker Carlson interviewing Putin, and there's a, you know, there's a in the beginning of the interview, Putin really went into a lot of history of Russia, and it. I think a lot of people would be interested in your take on what you got from Putin. Putin, maybe some fact checking. Did he say any lies? What's your take? Just give us your reaction to it, Charles.
Well, he knows a lot more history than the average Western leader, but that doesn't tell you much. Because the average Western leader today doesn't know much of anything. And that's even when they're not senile. Uh, we don't choose them on the basis of having brains. And so, in that respect, uh, he comes across looking a lot smarter and quicker. He comes across looking a lot smarter and quicker than our people. But again, that's not very hard to do. It doesn't mean he's a brainiac. It just means we're ruled by morons. But we knew that. It's no shock. What I found most interesting is something that I don't think too many people have commented on, and I think it's extremely important, and that is the place of religion in his thinking. Tucker Carlson asked him when he was talking about what's going on and all that. He said, "Do you see the hand of God in all of this? Do you see the influence of the supernatural in world affairs?" He said, "No." Now that's a very, very key statement because a lot of people like to think of him as some sort of Christian paladin, etc., because of his support of the Orthodox Church and everything else. But the fact is that whether you're Catholic or Orthodox or Anglican or Lutheran or Presbyterian or any kind of self-described Christian, except maybe Unitarian, um, you have to believe that God plays a role in world affairs. You have to believe that there's the hand of God in everyday life to which you are answerable. Because, see, that's the other half. It's not just that God has an influence in day to day affairs. Because he does, I have an obligation to him as a leader. Even my obligation to my people flows from my obligation to him. I think, I've said this many times. I'm not saying it to be funny. I believe it's very important that our masters believe they will go to hell if they rule us badly. He obviously doesn't believe that. Now, mind you, neither does anybody else in power in the West except maybe Viktor Orban. But that's part of the problem in the modern world. These creatures that control us think they're gods. Well, not gods, but nature's gift to mankind. And what did Putin say? He said, "No, no, I don't believe that. I believe that they're historical forces and so on and so forth, but not divine, not divine." Which means that he is still the Marxist materialist that he was trained to be. Now, mind you, he may have some sort of attachment to Orthodox ritual, and that may be sincere. I don't know. It could be sort of a Kennedy Eastern Orthodox, where you like to go through, or a Trudeau Eastern Orthodox, where you go through the rituals and all that, but it doesn't. You don't let it affect anything you would do in the real world. And that is basically what he confessed to being. Now, obviously, his historical analysis was what it was in the Russian viewpoint, and I would say it's something that does have to be considered. But there were other things that were a little bit crazy. I mean, Poland, it's funny. People are shocked when they learn something that they didn't know, as though someone was were keeping it from them. Anyone who's studied the Munich Agreement knows that Poland came in in 1938. They got in on the Munich Agreement so they could get a hold of a little district called Teschen, and Putin refers to this. Well, what I don't remember his mentioning is that Teschen was ethnically Polish, and the Czechs and the Poles had literally fought over it in 1918 until the Allies drew the border and Teschen stayed on the Czech side. Now, mind you, that doesn't justify the Poles going after it in 1938, but my point is that this didn't pop out of nowhere. And the implication that somehow the Poles caused World War II, you know what, they simultaneously attacked Germany and the Soviet Union? Is that what happened? I guess that must be why the Soviets had to invade. Makes sense. And that, by the way, also brings us to for me, a very disturbing thing that's emerged over the past couple of years of the war. And that is the reemergence, apparently, with Putin's permission of Lenin statues and the old Soviet red flag and all that. I mean, communism was at least as damaging to Russia as it was to any other country it's gone into. And the idea of re-embracing that stuff for the purpose of building up morale, it's horrific. It's utterly horrific. Especially if you're going to be accusing the Ukrainians of being Nazis. You know, waving the hammer and sickle at the swastika is not a good thing. So, I mean, I came away from the interview um, reassured that Putin is smarter than most of our Western people, which again doesn't mean much. But whatever hope I had 10 years ago that he might be something really different for Russia and thus the world, that's already shot to pieces. But this was the nail in the coffin. What he had to say about religion, well, okay, fine. So you don't believe in a God that affects mankind. Okay, great. So how are you different from Biden except that you're not senile?
Yeah.
You're not, you know, you're anti-gay proselytization. Okay, that's nice. So what?
Yeah, no, I mean, just watching the interview, my reaction was, you know, my emotional reaction from it was quite positive, but I realized that it's because Putin was embodying all these qualities, which are all these all these qualities that are not found in the people we've been suffering from,
See,
right?
this
And
is yeah, this
it's
is
an
the
emotion.
problem.
It's a trap, right? Because it's like you look at all these liberals and they're so ahistorical. I feel like in order to be a liberal, you have to be ahistorical,
Well,
and
you do. You got to be almost anti-historical.
right, right, and so
That's what wokery is about. Because remember, history was the product of dead white European men, and
right,
it's evil.
so it's easy to sort of have that emotional reaction and ride that and say, "Oh, this is someone who's embracing history, who's smart, so he's a good guy, right?" Well, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah,
We've got
yeah.
to watch out
And,
for that.
well, that and oddly enough, that in itself is kind of a liberal myth. The idea that education inevitably means virtue.
Right. Right.
But the problem is that we're basically dealing with two different kinds of evil. I mean, Putin represents a certain kind of well-educated, effective materialism. Our leadership represents a kind of moronic, ahistorical, anti-historical stupidity. So, you know, we're down to the stupid party and the evil party again, only as world affairs. And, you know, it's once you look at it in those terms, it's very difficult to get excited in favor of either one. The problem, of course, is that his troops really are in Ukraine, and what's to be done about it? I mean, obviously our masters will happily fight to the last Ukrainian. Uh, Russia, I honestly think that if there's to be peace, it's going to have to be gotten across that neither side is going to get everything they want.